So imagine you're sitting in a clinic room, right?
Okay, I'm there.
And it is the end of a super long week. You've got a clipboard resting on your knee, and you're staring at a line graph that's tracking a client's aggressive behaviors.
Very familiar scenario for a lot of people in the field, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So you trace the data path with your finger. On Tuesday, there were 8 instances of aggression.
Okay, 8.
Yeah. And then on Thursday, you look again, and the data point is sitting right at 8 instances again.
Right.
So the line connecting those 2 days is perfectly stubbornly flat. I mean, it looks completely stable, no change at all.
Just a straight horizontal line.
Exactly. And looking at that raw tally, I feel like the instinct is to just, feel discouraged, to assume the intervention plan is completely failing and the client is just stuck in this holding pattern.
Oh, it is so easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah.
I mean, our brains crave simple binary information.
Right, like 8 is 8.
Exactly. We see a flat line, we assume a static reality, 8 equals 8.
Yeah.
But this is where behavioral data gets incredibly messy and honestly, absolutely fascinating.
How so?
Well, what happens to that feeling of discouragement when you pull back the lens and look at the actual section parameters?
Oh, like the time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let's say you check the schedule and realize Tuesday's session was abruptly cut short. It was only like 10 minutes long.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. But Thursday's session was a full 30-minute block.
Wait, okay, that changes the entire landscape of what actually happened in that room?
It completely flips it.
Yeah, because on Tuesday, getting 8 instances of aggression in just 10 minutes, I mean, that means the client was in a state of rapid escalation.
Yeah, that's nearly an instance every single minute. The intensity of that crisis is massive.
Right. But then on Thursday, they had those same 8 instances, but spread out over an entire half hour.
Exactly.
So the behavior didn't stay the same, it actually plummeted.
It did. The frequency, that raw count of 8 is identical.
Mm.
But the actual speed, the intensity, the reality of what that client experienced is fundamentally different.
That is wild.
Right? If you rely solely on the raw number, you are flying completely blind. You're looking at a mathematical illusion of stability, when in reality, the client is experiencing this massive behavioral shift for the better.
Which means if you just look at those tally marks, you might tell a supervisor or like a stressed out parent, hey, we aren't making any progress, things are exactly the same.
And you'd be totally wrong.
Right, when the truth is the client is doing so much better and the intervention is actually working.
Exactly.
And that disconnect, between raw numbers and clinical reality, that is exactly why we are here today. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
So glad to be here.
Today, we are pulling from a fantastic specialized curriculum, Behavioral Intelligence con Mara Sanchez, powered by Amethyst Therapy Services.
Great curriculum.
It really is. And we're using it to look at an essential part of the complete RBT Task List series. Basically, we are tackling how we translate human behavior into numbers that actually tell the truth.
Yeah. So today we are unpacking Task List Item 8.6, which is calculate and summarize data in different ways.
Right.
And specifically, the curriculum focuses on rate, mean duration, and percentage. Because, as that Tuesday and Thursday scenario just proved, the way we calculate and summarize data doesn't just record reality, it literally dictates our perception of it.
I want to dig into the stakes of this right away, because for anyone working in the field or studying for their board exam, Domain A, which covers data collection and graphing, is worth 17% of the entire RBT exam.
17% is huge.
It's massive. But beyond passing a test, I mean, the reliance on data in applied behavior analysis is what separates it from so many other psychological fields, right?
Oh, absolutely. It is a natural science.
Right.
Exactly. Objective observation is the whole game.
Yeah.
I mean, the field operates on the philosophical assumption of empiricism.
So if the technician in the room who is, the actual eyes and ears on the ground, if they get the math wrong, the whole system just breaks down.
It completely collapses. ABA does not rely on subjective interpretations. You can't just write down, he seemed angrier today, or she had a pretty good session.
Yeah, those are just vibes.
Exactly. And a supervising BCBA cannot make safe, effective clinical decisions based on vibes.
No, definitely not.
If you're tracking a severe behavior, like self-injury, and your data summary is skewed, the BCBA might look at the graph and discontinue an intervention that was quietly saving that client's life.
Oh, wow. That's a terrifying thought.
Or conversely, they might maintain an intervention that is actively causing harm. The ethical principle of benefiting others is entirely reliant on the mathematical accuracy of the data collected in the room.
Okay, so the stakes are incredibly high. Let's look at the official BACB task list item. It reads, calculate and summarize data in different ways.
Very to the point.
Yeah, on the surface that sounds like basic middle school math. But let's talk about the philosophy of those two words, calculate and summarize.
Sure.
When we take raw data, like a tally mark or a stopwatch time, we're looking at a fundamental measure. Why do we actually need to transform it?
Well, because a fundamental measure is often contextless.
Yeah.
Calculating in this context usually means turning that raw fundamental measure into a derivative measure.
A derivative measure.
Oh, right. We are combining different dimensional quantities, like count and time, to create a standardized metric.
Got it. And summarizing.
Summarizing is the act of looking at multiple messy data points and finding the pattern. We need to be able to compare apples to apples.
So if you don't calculate and summarize,
then you are leaving the data in its raw, chaotic state, which is essentially unreadable over long periods of time.
okay, that makes perfect sense. So let's start building this toolkit with the most crucial derivative measure, which is rate.
Yes, rate is a big one.
Rate is simply frequency, the raw count, divided by time. So we're taking the number of responses and dividing it by the standard units of time the observation occurred in. We get things like hits per minute or mans per hour.
Right, perfectly stated.
But I want to push back on this a little bit because I know people in the field struggle with the necessity of this extra step.
Oh, all the time. Bring it on.
Okay, so if I'm in a session and a client is engaging in a high magnitude behavior, counting is easy. I have a clicker, I click it every time the behavior happens. Why introduce the cognitive load of doing math and dividing it by time? Why not just graph the raw frequency?
Because clinical environments are not laboratories.
Fair point.
In a perfectly controlled lab, every single session might be exactly 60 minutes long. If that were the case, frequency and rate would essentially tell the exact same visual story on a graph.
But in the real world?
In the real world, a client has a doctor's appointment, so a session is cut to 45 minutes.
Right.
Or a parent runs late picking them up, so a session stretches to 2.5 hours. The time boundaries are just constantly fluctuating.
Oh, I see. So if you just graph the raw frequency, you are ignoring the container that the behavior occurred in.
Exactly. The BCBAD precision note in our source material hammers this home. Frequency and rate are absolutely not interchangeable terms, even though people use them casually as if they are.
Like saying, what was the frequency of that when they actually mean rate?
Yes. Frequency is the raw count. Rate is the standardized count.
I see the utility, but isn't standardizing data like that potentially dangerous?
How so?
Well, let's go back to the kid who hits 10 times in 10 minutes. That is an intense crisis.
Extremely intense.
So if I take that data, 10 hits divided by 10 minutes, and I standardize it to an hourly rate, I am now reporting 60 hits per hour.
I see where you're going.
Right. But the kid didn't hit 60 times. He hit 10 times. I feel like by calculating the rate, I'm creating this hypothetical severity that didn't actually happen. It sounds like we are distorting reality to make the math work.
And that is a brilliant observation, and honestly, it is a trap a lot of practitioners fall into. Yeah, because you're touching on the conceptual difference between a measured rate and a projected outcome.
Okay, explain that.
When we report a rate of 60 hits per hour, we are not saying the client did hit 60 times. Nor are we saying they would have continued hitting 60 times if the session lasted an hour.
So what are we saying?
What the rate tells us is the speed of the behavior during that specific window of time. It's a measure of density.
Density, okay.
We are capturing the intensity of that 10-minute window so that it can be fairly compared to a 2-hour window on another day.
Oh, okay, that makes it clear. It's like looking at the speedometer in your car.
Exactly.
If I drive to the grocery store 5 minutes away and I hit 60 miles per hour on the main road, I didn't actually drive 60 miles. I only drove like 2 miles.
Right.
But my rate of travel was 60 miles per hour. The rate gives the behavior speed.
Yes, perfect analysis.
So if I only track frequency, the distance, I might tell a friend, hey, I drove 2 miles. And that sounds totally harmless.
Very casual.
But if I say, I drove 60 miles per hour through a residential neighborhood, suddenly the intensity and the danger of the behavior is crystal clear.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of rate. Rate races against the clock.
I love that.
And the Cooper text, which is essentially the Bible of behavior analysis, uses a similar concept to warn about the limitations of rate.
Oh, there are limitations.
Definitely. They bring up a scenario comparing two runners, let's call them Sarah and John. They both run at a rate of 8 minutes per mile. On paper, their rate of behavior is identical.
But I'm guessing the context of the observation period changes everything.
Right. What if Sarah maintained that 8-minute per mile rate for a single mile on a treadmill, but John maintained that exact same rate for a 26.2-mile marathon?
Oh, wow. Yeah, totally different.
Running 1 mile at that speed requires a certain level of physical behavior.
Yeah.
Maintaining it for hours is a completely different class of physiological endurance.
So even when we have the rate, we have to look at the time.
The Cooper text insists that we must always reference the counting time. A high rate over 2 minutes means something very different clinically than a high rate over 4 hours.
And we also have to recognize when rate is completely the wrong tool for the job, right? Like, our sources explicitly warn against using rate to measure continuous behaviors.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if a child is participating in a playground game or playing continuously with blocks, you can't really measure the rate of block playing.
No, it doesn't have a clear beginning and end every few seconds. It's one long, continuous stream of behavior.
Which brings us to the limits of counting in general. Rate solves the problem of unequal session lengths, but it still treats every instance of behavior as an instantaneous blip.
Right. A tally mark on a clicker doesn't care if the behavior lasted 1 second or 1 hour. It just counts as one.
But what happens when the behavior isn't a blip? What if a single tantrum lasts for 45 minutes?
Well, then a rate completely ignores the suffering and the endurance of that behavior.
And that necessitates our second calculation, which is mean duration. So duration is simply the measure of time from the onset to the offset of a behavior, how long it lasts.
Start the timer when it starts, stop it when it stops.
Right. We could just track total duration, which is starting a stopwatch when a behavior starts, stopping it when it stops, and then starting it again without resetting it the next time it happens.
Exactly. And that gives you the cumulative amount of time the client spent engaging in the behavior during the whole session.
But mean duration does something a little different.
Yeah, mean is just the statistical average. To find the mean duration, you take the total duration of all the individual episodes and you divide it by the total number of episodes.
Okay, so if you have 3 separate crying episodes.
You add the duration of all 3 together and divide by 3. Simple math.
It is, but I want to look at the clinical traps here, because average is a tricky mathematical concept.
It really is.
Let's say I am an RBT tracking tantrums. On Monday, the client has 3 tantrums.
Okay, frequency is 3.
The first one is 2 minutes long, the second one is 2 minutes long, but the third one, however, is a massive 56-minute meltdown.
Oh boy.
So the total duration is 60 minutes, the frequency is 3. So 60 divided by 3 gives a mean duration of 20 minutes per tantrum.
Yep, math checks out.
I graph that 20-minute mean and hand it to the BCBA. The BCBA looks at it and thinks, okay, this client is having 20-minute tantrums.
Right.
But that mean is a complete fiction. The client didn't have a single 20-minute tantrum. They had 2 tiny ones and 1 massive outlier.
Exactly.
The mean duration completely erased the reality of what happened in that room.
And this is one of the most critical vulnerabilities of the mean. It is a vital concept for anyone analyzing data. The mean is highly sensitive to outliers.
It just pulls the whole number.
Yeah. In your scenario, the mean duration paints a picture of a client having medium-length, consistent tantrums, which might lead a supervisor to design an intervention for medium-length tantrums.
But the reality is entirely different.
The reality is a client who mostly has very brief emotional responses, but occasionally spirals into a severe hour-long crisis. Those require entirely different clinical approaches.
So how do we combat that? I mean, if the task list requires us to know how to calculate the mean, but the mean can literally lie to us, what is the safeguard?
The safeguard is looking at the raw data alongside the summary.
Ah, okay. Don't just look at the average.
Right. A good summary should never completely destroy the raw data. It should organize it. This is why graphing software often allows BCBAs to see the range or the scatter plot of the individual data points.
That makes sense.
Or, from a statistical standpoint, this is why we sometimes look at the median instead of the mean, because the median is the literal middle number in a data set and is much more resistant to outliers.
Right.
But for the purposes of the RBT task list, understanding how to calculate the mean duration is step 1. Step 2 is recognizing that one giant 56-minute meltdown will pull the average way up and distort the picture.
It requires an incredible amount of critical thinking. We aren't just human calculators, we are analysts.
Beautifully said.
All right, let's shift to the third major calculation, percentage. The technical definition from our sources is a bit dense.
Oh, it's very dense.
It describes percentage as a ratio formed by combining the same dimensional quantities, such as count divided by count or time divided by time.
It sounds like alphabet soup.
It really does.
But it just means the numerator and the denominator have to be measuring the exact same type of thing.
Okay.
You can't divide a count by a duration to get a percentage. You take the number of times an event occurred, divide it by the total number of opportunities it could have occurred, and multiply by 100.
So if you present 10 math problems and the learner gets 8 correct, you are dividing a count of 8 by a count of 10.
Exactly, which is 0.8. Multiply by 100, and you get 80%.
Or in an interval recording where we divide a session into little blocks of time.
Right, time divided by time.
Let's say I am using whole interval recording to track on-task behavior during a 10-minute activity. And I break that into 10 one-minute intervals.
Okay.
I score how many intervals the client was entirely on task. Let's say I scored yes for 4 intervals.
Yep.
I divide the count of yes intervals, which is 4, by the total number of intervals, which is 10. Multiply by 100, and I get 40% of intervals with on-task behavior.
The math is very straightforward. But just like mean duration, percentage has a massive glaring limitation built right into its DNA.
What's that?
The Cooper text explicitly warns about this. Percentage caps at 100%.
Right. You can't get higher than 100.
Because of this artificial ceiling, percentage can tell us about a learner's accuracy, but it is completely blind to their fluency.
Fluency being the combination of accuracy and speed.
Yes.
We need an analogy that elevates this beyond just, taking a math test. In our outline, there was a ducking analogy, but let's use something with real stakes. Think about disarming a bomb.
Okay, high stakes. I like it.
If someone goes to bomb disposal school and they can successfully defuse 10 out of 10 training bombs, they have 100% accuracy.
They pass the test.
Right. On paper, using percentage, they are a master. They hit the ceiling of that metric. But what if it takes them 4 hours to figure out which wire to cut on a single bomb?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In the real world, a 4-hour defusal time means the bomb goes off. 100% accuracy without fluency is still a failure.
That's a phenomenal way to frame it.
The percentage metric completely masks the dangerously slow processing speed. Or, to use the baking analogy, if you bake 10 cookies and 8 come out perfect, you have 80% accuracy. But if it took you 12 hours to bake a single batch...
You're not going to be opening a bakery anytime soon.
Exactly.
Because percentage has no dimensional quantities of time built into it. It cannot assess the development of proficient, fluent behavior.
So how does this play out for an RBT?
Well, if an RBT only tracks percentage for a client learning to tie their shoes, the graph might show they were at 100% independence.
Looks great on a graph.
Sure does. But if it takes the client 20 minutes to tie their shoes every single morning, they are going to miss the school bus.
Oh, okay.
The accuracy is there, but the behavior is not yet functional for their real life.
Which is why we would need to pair that percentage with a rate or a duration measure. We need to know how accurate they are and how fast they are.
Exactly.
This really highlights why the BACB requires us to know multiple ways to summarize data. No single metric tells the whole truth.
Never. You always need the full picture.
I want to dive into another trap with percentage and correct responding that I found in the Cooper text excerpts.
Oh, the illusion of mastery?
Yes. It talks about how looking at an improving performance cannot be assessed by knowing only the correct rate. Why is that? I mean, if a client is getting more things right, isn't that the literal definition of improvement?
You would think so, but it could actually be a total illusion.
Walk me through it.
Let's look at a learner doing flashcards for sight words. On Monday, they get 10 correct per minute. On Friday, they get 20 correct per minute. The correct rate literally doubled. It looks like an incredible victory on the graph.
But you're about to tell me why it's not.
Let's look at the incorrect rate.
Okay.
On Monday, they got 10 correct, but they only got 2 incorrects per minute. They were taking their time thinking about the words.
That sounds like solid learning.
It is. But on Friday, they realized they get a token every time they get one right, so they started rushing.
Oh.
They started rapid-fire guessing.
Oh.
They got 20 correct per minute, sure, but their incorrect rate skyrocketed to 40 incorrect per minute.
Oh, wow. So the correct rate went up just by sheer volume of attempts?
Yes. The proportional accuracy actually tanked.
That is wild.
If the RBT and BCBA only measure and graph the correct rate, they get tunnel vision. They inadvertently reinforce a strategy of frantic guessing rather than actual skill acquisition.
So what does the Cooper text say we should do?
It points out that ideally, the correct response rate accelerates toward a goal, while the incorrect response rate decelerates to a low, stable level.
Ah, so they cross.
Exactly. You have to measure the errors just as closely as the successes to see the true picture of learning.
The more we unpack this, the more I realize just how much critical analysis is happening in the background of a seemingly simple data sheet.
It's an intense amount of data processing.
So let's take these three concepts, rate, mean duration, and percentage, and run them through some expansive real-world case
I
studies.
love application. Let's do it.
Let's see what this actually looks like on the ground across different environments. Let's start in a clinical setting, focusing on rate.
Okay, picture an early intervention clinic. The client is a 3-year-old who engages in severe head banging against the floor when denied access to a preferred item.
Oof. Okay. This is a high magnitude behavior. The priority is safety and reduction.
Exactly. The RBT is tracking this using a tally counter. It is a long session scheduled for 4 hours. Over the course of the session, the RBT tracks 18 instances of head banging.
So the frequency is 18, the time is 4 hours. But let's say the RBT also noted that the client took a 30-minute nap in the middle of the session where no demands were placed and no behavior could possibly occur.
Good catch.
Does that change the time parameter?
It absolutely should. If we want the most accurate rate, we should subtract time where the behavior was literally impossible or the client was not being observed.
Okay, let's do the math. Our 4-hour session, which is 240 minutes minus the 30-minute nap, leaves us with 210 minutes of actual observation time.
Which is 3.5 hours.
Okay, so we take our frequency of 18 and divide it by our true observation time of 3.5 hours.
Yep.
18 divided by 3.5 is roughly 5.14. So the rate is 5.14 instances per hour.
And look at what that does. By removing that nap time, we get a much more sensitive, accurate reflection of the behavior's density while the client was actually awake and active.
Because if we left the nap time in,
The rate would look artificially lower, diluting the severity of what happened while they were awake.
and this is where the RBT's meticulous documentation is everything, right? I mean, a tally counter doesn't know the client was asleep.
Exactly. Only the human in the room can provide that context.
Let's move to a school setting and apply percentage. A middle school learner with ADHD is integrated into a general education classroom.
Okay.
The target is independent worksheet completion. The teacher hands out a worksheet with 40 math problems.
So the RBT is fading their proximity, observing from the back of the room.
Right. The learner finishes the worksheet. The RBT reviews it and sees that out of the 40 problems presented, the learner completed 34 of them.
Okay, so we take the part over the whole.
34 completed divided by 40 total opportunities. That equals 0.85. Multiply by 100, and we have 85% completion.
Perfect math.
But keeping our bomb diffusal analogy in mind, 85% only tells us about their accuracy in finishing the task.
Right. We would need the RBT to have noted the start and stop time of the worksheet to know if the learner was fluent or if they spent 45 minutes staring out the window before rushing through those 34 problems in the last 10 minutes of class.
Exactly. The percentage is just one piece of the puzzle. Now let's move to a home setting, maybe an evening routine, and look at mean duration.
Oh, home sessions are always dynamic.
This is a classic scenario. A client has a history of severe tantrums right before dinner, when it's time to transition away from a preferred activity, like the iPad.
The iPad transition, a universal battleground.
Seriously. The RBT is running an evening session. They observe 3 separate tantrums during the transition protocol. They use a stopwatch on their tablet to time each individual episode.
Okay, what are the times?
The first tantrum, right when the iPad is removed, lasts 12 minutes.
Okay, 12.
The client eventually calms down and begins walking to the table, but then drops to the floor and the second tantrum begins. This one lasts 4 minutes.
4 minutes, got it.
Finally, they sit at the table. But when presented with non-preferred food, a third tantrum erupts. This one lasts 8 minutes.
Okay, so to find the mean duration, the average, I first need the total duration.
Right, 12 minutes plus 4 minutes plus 8 minutes. That is 24 minutes total of tantrum behavior.
And then I divide that total duration by the number of occurrences, which is 3.
24 divided by 3 is 8. So the mean duration is 8 minutes per tantrum.
Which is incredibly vital data for the parents.
How so?
Well, a BCBA can look at that mean and tell the parents, when a tantrum starts during this routine, the current data suggests you need to be prepared to endure it for an average of 8 minutes.
Oh, that's huge for setting expectations.
Exactly. Don't give the iPad back at minute 5 because we know they are capable of pushing through to minute 8. It sets a realistic expectation for the people actually living with the behavior.
It sets expectations, and it also reveals trends over time, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like if next month the mean duration drops to 3 minutes, even if they are still having 3 tantrums a night, the intensity and the toll on the family is significantly reduced.
And you wouldn't know that if you just looked at the frequency of 3.
Right. We have laid out the mechanics of this beautifully, but I want to talk about measurement bias.
Oh, this is a great topic.
Because human beings are the ones operating the stopwatches and tally counters, and human brains are notoriously flawed instruments.
Very flawed.
Our perception of time and frequency gets warped by stress, by fatigue, and by the sheer chaos of a clinical environment. What are the conceptual mistakes and biases that creep in when we are summarizing this data?
One of the most fascinating sources of bias actually comes from the measurement systems themselves, specifically interval recording.
Okay, break that down.
We touched on this briefly, but it deserves a deeper look because it systematically distorts reality by design.
By design. Wait, really?
Yes. Let's look at partial interval recording. You break a 10-minute observation into 20, 30-second intervals. If the target behavior happens at any point during that 30-second window, even for just a single millisecond, you mark the entire interval with a yes.
Wait, so if a client engages in vocal stereotypy, like humming, for 2 seconds, and then is quiet for the remaining 28 seconds of the interval?
That entire block of time is scored as a yes, the behavior occurred.
Oh, wow. And if they hum for all 30 seconds, it is scored the exact same way.
Exact same way.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Right. Because of this mechanism, partial interval recording inherently and systematically overestimates the actual occurrence of behavior.
It totally inflates the data.
Yes. It makes it look like the behavior is happening much more frequently or taking up much more time than it actually is.
That sounds like a terrible measurement system.
Yeah.
Why would we purposefully use a system that lies to us and overestimates the problem?
Because sometimes we want a hypersensitive alarm system.
We typically use partial interval recording for behaviors we want to decrease, like aggression or disruptive stereotypy. By overestimating the behavior, we are taking the most conservative approach.
We're forcing ourselves to see it.
Exactly. We are forcing ourselves to pay attention to even the tiniest instances of the behavior. If the data shows a decrease under partial interval recording, we can be absolutely certain the behavior has actually decreased in reality, because the system was rigged to capture every single blip.
It's like setting your watch 5 minutes fast so you are never late.
That's exactly what it's like.
You know it's an overestimation, but it serves a functional purpose.
Right.
So what about whole interval recording? This is where the behavior must occur for the entire duration of the interval to get a yes.
So if the interval is 30 seconds, and the client engages in the behavior for 29 seconds but stops for 1 second,
Don't tell me.
the entire interval is scored as a no.
Wow. So that system systematically underestimates the behavior. It misses a massive amount of actual occurrence.
Exactly. It filters out anything that isn't sustained. So we use whole interval recording for behaviors we want to increase, like sustained attention or cooperative play.
We set a really high bar.
We only want to give credit if the client is truly sustaining the behavior. It is a conservative measure of progress.
The design of the data collection method literally dictates the shape of the reality we see on the graph. That is wild.
It really is.
Okay, I want to pivot. The original outline for this deep dive had a section with multiple choice quiz questions.
Oh, like for the exam.
Yeah, but honestly, reading A, B, C, D options on a podcast is incredibly dry. I want to turn this into a series of thought experiments. I want you to put me in the hot seat.
Want you in the hot seat. Okay.
Yeah, give me 5 tricky clinical dilemmas where RBTs usually mess up these concepts, and let's work through the logic organically.
I love that. Let's do it. Dilemma number 1.
Right.
You are an RBT. You are observing a client who has a history of elopement, running away. During a 15-minute recess period, the client attempts to elope 6 times.
Okay, 6 times in 15 minutes.
Your BCBA asks you for the rate. But instead of giving them the rate, you write down 6 and hand them the paper. Why is that a problem, and what is the actual rate?
Well, it's a problem because 6 is just the frequency. It's a raw count floating in space without the context of the recess period.
Right.
The BCBA can't compare that 6 to a 30-minute PE class tomorrow. To get the rate, I need to divide the count by the time.
Do the math.
6 elopement attempts divided by 15 minutes. 6 divided by 15 is 0.4. So the rate is 0.4 elopement attempts per minute.
Perfect. Dilemma number 2.
Bring it.
You are reviewing data on a student's hand-raising behavior. You see 2 sessions logged. Session A was 12 minutes long. Session B was 47 minutes long.
Okay, 12 and 47.
The raw frequency count for both sessions is 10. The teacher looks at this and says, oh, the behavior is completely stable, 10 and 10. How do you correct the teacher?
I would tell the teacher they are falling for the illusion of stability. Comparing a 12-minute container to a 47-minute container using raw numbers is comparing apples to oranges.
Exactly. Walk me through the rates.
In session A, 10 hand raises in 12 minutes is a rate of almost 1 per minute. 10 divided by 12 is roughly 0.83.
Right.
In session B, 10 hand raises in 47 minutes is a dramatically lower rate. 10 divided by 47 is roughly 0.21.
So what's the conclusion?
The behavior isn't stable at all. The density of the behavior plummeted in the second session. We have to use rate to standardize those unequal sessions.
Spot on. Okay, dilemma number 3. This one is about the dimensional quantities of time.
Okay.
You are running discrete trials. You give the instruction, touch your nose.
Yeah.
You start your stopwatch the exact millisecond you finish speaking. You stopwatch the exact millisecond the client's finger touches their nose.
Okay, so I'm timing the gap.
Right. It took 3 seconds. What did you just measure? A lot of people will say duration.
But it's not duration. Duration measures how long a behavior lasts once it has actually started.
Right.
I measured latency. Latency is the elapsed time between the onset of a stimulant, my instruction, and the initiation of the response.
Perfect.
I like to picture a track and field race. The time between the starter pistol firing and the runner pushing off the blocks is the latency.
I love that visual.
The time it takes the runner to actually run around the track and cross the finish line is the duration. In this dilemma, I measured how long it took the client to process the instruction and initiate the movement. That's latency.
That is an excellent visual distinction. Dilemma number 4. We talked about how partial interval recording overestimates behavior.
Yes, the hypersensitive alarm.
But what if a BCBA wants a measurement system that captures an estimate of frequency and duration, but they know you, the RBT, have to manage a chaotic classroom and can't watch the client continuously?
Okay, so I need something easier.
They ask you to use momentary time sampling. You have a timer that goes off every 2 minutes. When it beeps, you look up. If the client is engaging in the behavior at that exact split second, you mark yes. If not, you mark no.
Huh?
What is the major vulnerability of this system?
The vulnerability is that it is essentially a series of random snapshots. If the client is engaging in the behavior for 1 minute and 59 seconds, but they stop to scratch their nose right when the timer beeps.
You mark no.
Right. I look up, I see them scratching their nose, I mark no. All of that actual behavior is completely lost to the data sheet.
It's just gone.
It requires minimal effort from me, which is great if I'm busy, but it can miss a massive amount of data if the behavior doesn't happen to align with the timer beeping.
Which is why we only use momentary time sampling for behaviors that are continuous or occur at very high rates, where a random snapshot is highly likely to catch it.
That makes total sense.
Okay, final dilemma, number 5. Let's talk about inter-observer agreement, or IOA.
IOA, all right.
This is when 2 observers independently track the same behavior to see if they're seeing the same thing. You and another RBT are counting instances of echolalia during a 30-minute session. At the end, you count 7 instances. The other RBT counts 10 instances.
Okay, 7 and 10.
To find the total count IOA, you divide the smaller count, 7, by the larger count, 10, and multiply by 100. That gives you 70% agreement.
Which is too low.
Right. In ABA, we generally want IOA to be at 80% or higher. So a 70% means you two have a reliability problem. You aren't defining or seeing the behavior the same way.
Okay, so what's the dilemma?
Here's the dilemma. What is the hidden danger, even if your total count IOA was 100%? What if you both counted exactly 10?
If we both counted 10, our total count agreement is 100%. But the danger is that we might not have been counting the same 10 instances.
Yes. Expound on that.
Like, I might have counted 10 instances in the first 15 minutes of the session, and then the client fell asleep, so I counted 0 in the second half. The other RBT might have been looking at their phone for the first 15 minutes, counted 0, and then counted 10 instances in the second half.
Exactly. Our totals match perfectly, 10 and 10. The formula says we have 100% agreement.
But our actual moment-to-moment observation was entirely discordant. The total count hides the chronological reality.
That is the illusion of agreement.
Mm.
Total count IOA is the simplest calculation, but it provides 0 assurance that the observers recorded the same occurrences of behavior.
So what's the fix?
That's why, depending on the behavior, A BCBA might require trial-by-trial IOA, which forces the observers to compare their data point by point, interval by interval, ensuring they are agreeing on the exact same instances in time.
These thought experiments really highlight the immense responsibility we have when handling data. I mean, a single wrong summary or a misunderstood measurement system can entirely rewrite the client's clinical reality.
It's a huge responsibility.
Which brings us to one of the most important segments of this deep dive. It is time for the Ethics Minute.
Yes, the Ethics Minute.
Because where there is data, there is a temptation to manipulate it. The BACB Ethics Code for RBTs is incredibly strict regarding data collection, documentation, and honesty. But I want to look at the psychology of why people violate this code, because nobody wakes up and decides to be a data fraud.
No, it's usually born out of stress or good intentions.
Right. Let's look at a scenario from the Amethyst Study Guide. You are an RBT. You are having a brutal, chaotic session in a home environment. The client is engaging in high rates of behavior. The parents are hovering and looking stressed. The family dog is barking. The doorbell is ringing. You are just trying to keep everyone safe.
We have all been there. It is overwhelming.
At the end of the session, the house finally quiets down. You look at your data sheet and realize, in the chaos, you completely forgot to collect data for the last 15 minutes.
A classic mistake.
But you were there. You lived it. You have a general impression of what happened. What is the harm in just estimating the counts, jotting down a few tally marks so the graph doesn't have a blank spot, and calling it a day?
The harm is that you are replacing objective reality with subjective memory. And human memory under stress is deeply unreliable.
You just can't remember it accurately.
You really can't. Under no circumstances can you estimate data. Look, the pressure to have a complete data sheet is immense. RBTs often feel like a blank spot on a graph means they failed at their job or that the BCBA will be angry with them. They want to look competent, so they backfill, they guess.
Which violates the code.
Totally. Altering, omitting, estimating, rounding up, or backfilling data, regardless of your intent, is data fraud. It is a severe ethical violation of the BACB code.
What if it's born out of empathy?
Empathy. Like how?
Say a client is doing a matching task, 10 trials. They get 6 out of 10 right independently. But you have been working with this kid for months. You know they're tired today. You watch them struggle, and they tried really hard on 3 of the errors.
I see where this is going.
They were so close. Can you write down 9 out of 10 to reflect their effort and keep them motivated?
That empathy, while totally understandable as a human being, is actually dangerous to the client's progress. Data must be recorded exactly as observed, in real time, without modification.
But why is it dangerous?
Because if you falsify that data to a 9 out of 10, because you feel bad for the client, you are compromising the BCBA's clinical decision-making. The BCBA looks at that graph, sees a 90% accuracy, and assumes the client has achieved mastery.
Oh, I see.
Right, so the BCBA moves them on to a harder, more complex task. But the client didn't actually master the foundational skill. Now they are entirely unprepared for the new task.
They're going to crash.
They are going to fail, they're going to get frustrated, and their behaviors might escalate. By trying to be nice, you inadvertently set the client up for a massive failure.
The data isn't a grade in a classroom. It is the architectural blueprint of the treatment. If you lie about the foundation, the whole house collapses.
That is a perfect way to phrase it.
And there are massive systemic consequences beyond just the clinical impact, right?
Absolutely. ABA services are heavily regulated and typically funded by insurance companies, schools, or state agencies. The graphs you create as an RBT are the legal documentation of progress that justifies the continued funding of those services.
So if you fake it.
If you are estimating data or rounding up to make things look better, you are creating misleading progress documentation. Presenting falsified data to a funding source constitutes insurance fraud.
Insurance fraud? That's huge.
It can result in the loss of your certification, the loss of the BCBA's license, and severe legal consequences for the agency.
So what is the ethical action? If I mess up, if I drop my clicker, if the dog eats my data sheet, what do I do?
Honesty is the only policy. The ethical action is to document the error transparently.
Just own it.
Yes. You write an objective note in your session summary. Data was not collected from 3:45 to 4 p.m. due to client escalation requiring immediate safety management. Or data was lost due to a software crash on the tablet.
And what will the BCBA do?
You tell your BCBA immediately. And a good BCBA will never punish you for prioritizing safety over a tally mark or for a technical glitch. They will appreciate your integrity because they can work with missing data. They cannot work with fake data.
That transparency is exactly what builds trust in the supervisory relationship. Let's pull the curtain back on that relationship with some supervisor insight.
Sure.
When a BCBA comes out to the field to observe an RBT running a session, what are they actually looking for regarding data calculation and summarization? How do they distinguish between a technician who is just going through the motions and an exceptional practitioner?
A BCBA is looking for real-time, fluid integration of data collection into the natural environment. We often use tools like the Performance Diagnostic Checklist, the PDC, to assess if a breakdown in data collection is a training issue, a resource issue, or a motivation issue.
Okay, so what does excellent look like?
Excellent implementation looks seamless. The RBT has their environment prepped. They note the exact start and stop time of the session immediately. They tally frequency reliably as it happens, not 5 minutes later.
Right.
And here is the key. Before the session ends, or immediately after, they convert that raw count to a rate or percentage themselves, understanding the context of what they just observed, and they log it directly into the graphing software. They're actively managing the math in the moment.
They aren't treating the data like an afterthought. It is a primary function of the intervention.
Exactly.
What does poor implementation look like?
Poor implementation is relying on memory at the end of the day. It's sitting in your car an hour after the session, trying to remember if the client hit 4 times or 5 times.
Oh, that guessing game again?
Right. It is leaving the session duration field blank on the data sheet, which we know makes calculating rate impossible. Or, and this happens frequently in home settings, the RB key gets to the house, realizes they forgot to track a behavior, and asks the caregiver, hey, how many times do you think he hit his brother today?
Oh, no.
And they record that estimate as objective frequency data.
Which violates the very foundation of empiricism. You didn't observe it. You are recording secondhand subjective estimates as scientific fact.
Exactly. The BCBA wants to see that you understand why the data matters, the philosophy behind it, not just that you know how to click a button on an app. They want to see that you understand the weight of the numbers you are recording.
To help lock all of this in, let's share a memory hack. When our listeners are out in the field, overwhelmed by a chaotic session, or sitting in a quiet testing center staring at an exam question, how can they quickly recall these formulas?
Here are 3 quick visual and auditory anchors for these calculations.
I'm ready.
First, rate. Remember the phrase, rate races against the clock. Or use the acronym, R equals R over T. Rate equals raw count over time. If you don't have the time, you can't run the race.
Rate races against the clock. Got it.
Second, mean duration. Focus on the letter M. Mean is in the middle. It is the average, the central tendency of all the occurrences. But remember the trap. The middle can be pulled off center by a giant outlier.
Mean is in the middle. Okay.
Third, percentage. Focus on the letter P. Percentage is a part over the whole. But visualize that ceiling, it caps at 100. It measures the part you got right, but it doesn't measure how fast you did it.
Rate races against the clock. Mean is in the middle. Percentage is a part over the whole. That cuts through the math anxiety and gives you immediate conceptual hooks.
Exactly.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the fundamental philosophy of natural science to the strict ethical boundaries of data entry. Let's synthesize this into a rapid review. Give us the big 5 takeaways from this deep dive.
Okay, here we go. Number 1. Rate is frequency divided by observation time. It standardizes data by giving it a speed, allowing us to compare sessions of unequal lengths fairly. Number 2, never use raw frequency to compare those unequal sessions. If you do, you will fall victim to an illusion of stability or a false illusion of change. Always convert to rate to see the true density of the behavior.
Right, apples to apples. Number 3.
Number 3, mean duration is the total duration of all episodes divided by the number of occurrences. It tells you the average length of a behavior, which is vital for setting clinical expectations, but you must be vigilant for massive outliers that can skew the average and distort reality.
The 56-minute tantrum. Okay, number 4.
Number 4, percentage is calculated by dividing a count by a total possible count, or an interval by a total interval. It is excellent for measuring accuracy, like correct versus incorrect responses, but it has strict limitations. It caps at 100% and cannot measure fluency or proficiency because it lacks the dimension of time.
You have to know how fast they are doing it. And number 5.
Number 5, honesty is the foundation of our science. Never estimate, alter, round up, or backfill data. Data fraud is a serious ethical violation that directly harms the client's progress, compromises the entire treatment plan, and can constitute legal fraud. If you miss data, Document the error transparently.
So what does this all mean for you, the practitioner listening right now? We've talked about math, formulas, and ethics, but I want to bring this back to the human element.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think about how the act of calculating objective data actually changes your perception of a human being.
That's deep. What do you mean?
Have you ever been in a session, or even just dealing with your own kids, and felt like they were having just a terrible day? They were loud, you were exhausted, you were frustrated, and it felt like the behaviors were never ending. The session felt heavy and dark.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone has felt that.
But then, at the end of the day, you sat down, did the math, calculated the rate, found the mean duration, and realized their target behaviors were actually significantly lower than they were last week.
That is such a universal experience in this field. The emotional weight of the session feels catastrophic, but the math tells a story of quiet progress.
And that happens because human memory is deeply flawed and heavily biased toward intense moments. If a client has one very intense, loud, highly aggressive 5-minute tantrum that scares you, your brain anchors to that fear.
You just can't shake it.
Right. You remember the entire 3-hour session as a bad day, even if the other 2 hours and 55 minutes were perfectly compliant, happy, and productive.
Wow, yeah.
Calculating objective data, finding the true rate, the true mean duration, the true percentage, is your armor against your own human bias. It allows you to strip away your exhaustion and your emotional reaction.
It grounds you.
It allows you to see the client's actual reality, their actual progress. Trusting the math is how we honor the client's hard work, even when we are too tired to see it in the moment.
Trust the math. It honors the client. What a profound way to look at something as seemingly dry as a calculation.
It's the most human part of the job, really.
When we started this deep dive, we talked about that flat line on the Tuesday and Thursday graph. We talked about how easy it is to be blind to reality if you don't know how to look at the numbers.
That illusion of stability.
Right. Mastering these small calculations rate, mean duration, percentage is exactly what separates a good technician from an exceptional one. It is the difference between being blind to a client's progress and being able to genuinely celebrate it.
Absolutely.
We highly encourage you to subscribe to Behavioral Intelligence con Mara Sanchez, powered by Amethyst Therapy Services, so you don't miss the next part of our complete RBT Task List series. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep collecting that data, keep trusting the math, and we will see you next time.